These are the parts that I used to convert my 68 Nova with factory drum brakes to 98 to 02 FBody front brakes, front disc brakes. This here is the drum wheel cylinder off the Nova. I've turned the diameter down, and I'll insert that footage here. Alright, so here we have the 98 through 02 Camaro disc brake rotor, and here is the wheel hub off of the Nova. The diameter inside the rotor here is smaller than the diameter of the hub. The bolt circle is the same. So what I'm going to do is machine that diameter down on this old Victor engine lathe. The inside diameter of this rotor is roughly 5.9 inches. The diameter of this hub is about 6.2 inches. If you look, it's just a casting. It's not a machined edge on the outside there. This face right here is machined. You can see there's only one square diameter to chuck on right here. This back part has a taper. I'm going to need longer wheel studs, so I'm going to go ahead and press out these wheel studs, and then I'll be able to chuck right here. About to press out the wheel studs. Alright, got all the wheel studs out, got it chucked up on a square diameter. Now I need to indicate this face, which is where the rotor sits against the wheel hub here. Get it true. And then after that, I'm going to indicate on this bearing race here to make sure that it's concentric. Got my dial zeroed. See what a 50,000 split looks like. About 8,000 per revolution feet. That should have been 100 thousandths. We're shooting for 5.9. We got about 6 inches and 80 thousandths. 180 to go. 5.885. Let's see if it'll drop in that rotor now. Pretty snug fit. People do this operation with a grinding wheel while it's on the car, and I suppose that would work. But since I have access to a lathe and the ability to use it, I'll go ahead and turn it. I installed longer wheel studs. This is a 1 3/4 length under the head. It's a 7/16 20 with a 472 knurl. The original is 1 3/8, and it was too short for the wheels I'm using. If you ask for a 1960 Corvette wheel stud, O'Reilly's will give you this. I've got the longer ones installed, and I've got the wheel bearings packed with fresh grease. This is the disc from the Camaro. This will fit inside the back side here since I've turned them down. This is the conversion bracket. You can buy these online. Several people sell them. This is the original 5/8 18 thread bolt from the drum brake assembly. It holds on the backing plate for the drum brakes. This whole section will get in the way, so you have to cut it off or replace it with this grade 8 bolt. That's what I'm using, a washer. The underhead length is 1 3/8. This is the longer of the factory steering knuckle bolts. It's too short. If you install with this bolt, that's approximately how far the nut will go on. It doesn't protrude at all. It's actually a little recessed. I went out and picked up a 1/2 inch 20, 3 inch long grade 8 to replace it. That lock washer is needed to space the bracket to make the caliper parallel. I'll show you that when I install it. This is the FBody brake caliper. Front, it's got pads, it's got the bracket. This is the factory bolt from the FBody. It's way too long. I cut mine down. They're about 900 thousandths underneath the head. If you left them the length that they come, they would protrude out the back side and they would touch your disc brake, so they have to be cut down. Or you could replace them with a shorter one. Now I'll get to the car and show you how it all goes on. This is the drum brake spindle. The disc brake spindle on these cars are nearly exactly the same. The difference being this pad here is recessed about 1/2 inch. I suppose you could use a disc brake spindle, but you'd have to space it out in order for the bracket to work right and be in the right location. This is the hole that the bracket uses in the steering knuckle and the spindle. Here's the original bolt. It's fine if that's all you had to put on there, but when you put the bracket on, it's too short. I'll show you. You've got to have a spacer to make the bracket parallel. Sit on the back side of the bracket and go in between the bracket and the spindle. You can see there's not much thread sticking out. It is a lock washer, so it will stick out a little further, but it's too short for me. Alright, now we can put the wheel hub on. I'm not bothering with cotter pins. I'm just throwing this all together. I've got to tear it all down and paint it and everything, so I'm just going to leave the cotter pin off. Now, throw this brake, this brake on here. There you go. You need the distance of that bracket to be parallel with your brake rotor here. Use some dial calipers. Make sure that it's parallel. It's within about 15 thousandths. It'll work good. Throw this caliper on here. Use the short bolts. You use a caliper bolt that's any longer than 900 thousandths, you will have a really hard time getting it past that steering knuckle into that hole. How much of that you can see. It's not a lot of clearance between the caliper and the rotor. Now, I'm going to run 15-inch mid-80s Camaro wheels, and I'm sure that these calipers need to be clearanced. I think we need to grind off these fins, and I think that's all they need. I also believe might need a 5/16 spacer, which is another reason I went with the longer wheel studs. Let's try and fit that wheel on. It's definitely hanging up. I'll go ahead and grind those fins down. Using a pneumatic right angle grinder for the coarse flat disc. Chews it up pretty good. I went ahead and put some lugs on. Get the wheel centered up on the hub. Looks like I got enough clearance on the fins, but you can see the front of the caliper is touching the wheel. And pull it off and look at it. Alright, 70 has 5/16 spacers, same brake conversion. See how it fits now. After looking at it a little more, I seen the rim was rubbing right here, so I went ahead and knocked all these down a little further. Let's try it again. Pretty sure that noise is the pads hanging up on the rotor. Show you the clearance in the back. Lots of clearance. I'll go ahead and take the wheel off and show you how flat those fins are now. It's pretty flat. I went ahead and ground the casting line off the front of the caliper and softened up these corners also. It's a 5/16 thick O'Reilly's spacer. Doesn't center up very well, but once you get a wheel in there, you can kind of get your fingers in there and get it centered. $70. Got the Pro Stars. Skinny. I didn't grind these fins at all because with a spacer, the skinny rim doesn't even get to the fins. Mid-80s Camaro wheel, 15-inch. 215/70 tire. '68 four-door. It's coming along. So you can see I got the brake hose from the Camaro and the bracket. I'm not going to use the bracket, but that fitting is an M10 bubble flare. If you had the factory brake lines in your car, like the 70 does here, you'd have to get an adapter right there. That's an M10 bubble flare, and that's I believe that's a 5/16 inverted flare. You can see the fitting has a female 5/16 inverted flare side and a male M10 bubble flare. You can get those on Amazon somewhere around 12 bucks for a set of two. You can see I'm using the factory bracket. I don't have my clip pushed on all the way. This car, the brake lines were rotted, and I intend to use the Camaro master cylinder and brake booster. So instead of going back and forth from metric to standard fittings, I'm just going to build my own lines using all metric flares, the bubble flares. So an overview of what you need to buy. You need the caliper and bracket for both sides, the hardware, which you have to cut down to 900 thousandths under the head. You might be able to buy one the right length, but I don't know. I wasn't able to find one. You need the rotor. You need the adapter bracket. You need a longer 1/2" 20 for the lock washer, just to use as a spacer. And you need the 5/8 18 bolt. Replaces this guy here. I used a washer on mine. And you may need longer wheel studs. Also, you'll probably need to get a disc brake master cylinder and a proportioning valve. This car has disc up front, drum in the rear, so I bought the appropriate proportioning valve. Master cylinder is off a 79 Z28 Camaro. So is the booster there. My next video will be doing the rear disc brake conversion. Again, using the 98 through 02 FBody disc brakes. V6 or V8, doesn't matter. Same brakes. These happen to be V6 brakes that I'm using for this 68. You have to get the disc brake, e-brake, caliper with the bracket, of course. The abutment bracket. This bolts on to the end of the axle tube. You have to take the axles out of the rear end to get this bracket off. I believe this is the bracket that holds the e-brake cable. And then I got all the hardware. Little levers for the e-brake and adjusters and all the stuff you need. The issue with this installation comes with the staggered shocks that the Nova has. On one side you'll have clearance, on the other side something runs into the shock. I haven't done this one yet, but when I do, you'll see what I go through to get it to work. See you in the next one.